All right, all right. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is where you're calling in from. Welcome to this month's collaborative mentoring webinar series, Cultivating Wellness and the Resilience, the Power of Hope. We're very excited that you're all here with us today for this really great conversation. As you're settling in, feel free to drop in your name, where you're calling in from in the chat, and what is your favorite, I should have thought of this before, what is your favorite fall activity? Do you like smelling candles? Do you like trick-or-treating? Do you like watching a movie? Whatever it is, what is your favorite fall activity? As we're giving folks a couple minutes to settle in. So again, make sure to click the three dots in the chat box to make sure everybody can see your message, and you're just dropping in your name, where you're calling in from, and what is your favorite fall activity. Love it. Sherry kicking us off. Watching the changes in nature is a fun thing for me. Yes, I love having grown up in Massachusetts and getting to see the leaves change so vividly. That's a great answer. Fall candles, Jay from Texas. Awesome. Fall food, carving pumpkins, amazing. So for folks who are just joining in, welcome on into this month's collaborative mentoring webinar series, Cultivating Wellness and Resilience, the Power of Hope. I'm really excited for this conversation. We have a really amazing panel of folks to talk about this subject. As we're giving folks another maybe minute or so to settle on in, you're just dropping your name, where you're calling in from, and then what is your favorite fall activity in the chat. Awesome. I got to catch up and see fall colors and soups. Oh, I haven't had a soup yet this fall, and that feels criminal. Melissa from Virginia loves Halloween. Same. Fall weather, apple picking, decorating for the holidays. I love it. More Halloween love from Bryson. Same. I was up late the other night getting one of my costumes ready. I'm a very DIY person, so I'm looking forward to finishing those up this evening. Pam from Milwaukee says all of the above. I get that. It's hard to choose. Awesome. So again, welcome on in, everybody. We'll get started in just a second, but here today we're talking about cultivating wellness and resilience, the power of hope. My name is Jake Sullivan. I use he, him pronouns. I work with Mentor National as a training delivery manager. Very happy to be here with you all today. Again, continue to feel free to let us need photos of the costumes. I will absolutely share photos when they're ready. But continue to introduce yourselves in the chat and we will get started. So some things that are good to know throughout today's webinar. Use the chat box, as you all are already, to introduce yourself, talk with one another throughout the webinar. I know our panelists have some questions for you. So throughout the webinar, to answer in the chat, share any resources or other ideas that you have, and respond to the presenters. Use either the chat box or the emojis to let the presenters know how you're feeling about the content today. Any questions that you have, we'll have a dedicated time at the end for an audience Q&A portion. So you can drop those into the Q&A box so that they're all in one place. I believe you're also able to upvote ones that you would like to see answered, especially just in case we don't have time for everybody's questions. If you haven't already and you would like to do so, the live captions are available in the panel by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. And then just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and it'll be sent out in about a week with the slides and any other resources that we shared today. Here's a little bit of an overview of what we'll get into today for this webinar. I have a couple polls that I'll launch in just a second to get to know you all just a little bit more before we dive into the facilitator and the panelists exploring what is hope. We'll take a hope inventory. I'm really excited for that. We'll all get to learn a little bit more about ourselves in today's webinar as well. Then we have time for the audience Q&A, moving into action steps, and then some further resources in closing. So let me launch our polls. The first one is one of the ones that we always do at these webinars, getting a feel for who's in the room with us. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen asking you, what is your role in the mentoring field? And I always say a lot of us wear several different hats. So just pick whichever one you're feeling like most represents you today. And I'll give you all 20, 30 seconds or so to answer that. Awesome. About 10 seconds more. So get your answers in if you haven't already. All right. And I will end the poll there. Share the results out. So it looks like most of us are mentoring program staff and practitioners. Then we do have a few national or affiliate organization staff, mentors, educators. We have one researcher, so shout out to that researcher, a couple of funders as well. Shout out to you. Thank you for doing what you do. I always love to, if you were one of the 5 others, feel free to drop in what you do in the chat. I am always curious who joins us in these webinars. Stop sharing that poll. And I have one other one based around what our knowledge level is around hope as it relates to wellness. So not much current knowledge, beginner level or basics, intermediate or expert. Again, no matter where you are, you're welcome in this webinar and welcome to share your ideas. We're excited that you're here, whether you're an expert or you don't have much current knowledge. Take a few seconds to reflect on that and answer that poll, and then we'll close it out. So I'm seeing folks drop in CASA volunteer, community intervention specialist. Thanks for sharing those others, very important positions. So thank you. All right, about 10 more seconds before I close out the poll. Okay, ending the poll, sharing the results. So it looks like most folks fall within those 2 middle options, either beginner level or basics around this topic, or an intermediate level. So excited for this conversation, having that knowledge, and our presenters can kind of use that to inform how they talk about the things that we'll talk about today. So we'll stop sharing. And I believe, yes. So now I have the absolute honor to introduce Sherry Collins, who will be our facilitator and presenter today. Sherry is a speaker and consultant living in Omaha, Nebraska, currently in Colorado speaking at a conference. She's certified in several training areas through Mentor National. And some of her highlights, her career highlights, include facilitating courses through the National Education Association, authoring a chapter on inclusion for the Parent Ready book series, serving on the advisory board for the Harvard Business Review, and has developed several workplace mentoring programs. So very excited and very grateful for Sherry for organizing this webinar, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jake. It's a thrill to be here. And like you said, I'm joining today from the beautiful city of Denver, Colorado. So it's a little different scenery for me. So let me introduce our panelists. Jake, if you want to go ahead. So the first panelist I'm excited to introduce is Horace Stone. I met Horace this past year when we were both presenting at a conference at Ohio State, which was awesome. Horace is a classroom management restorative practices trainer and former school administrator with almost 30 years of K-8 experience. He is a certified school restorative practice coordinator with ADHD neuroscience certification. And Horace, you had me at neuroscience. I love anything to do with the brain. He possesses a wealth of curriculum, instruction, and assessment experience and in-depth continuous school improvement knowledge. He brings a broad understanding of comprehensive classroom behavior management strategies for adverse conditions stemming from trauma. He has served in various teacher leader roles, ranging from elementary to middle level teacher to program supervisor. He is also an active member of the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. And I love Horace's motto. His equitable and restorative motto is give people a second chance to make a first impression. And we cannot do that without hope. Horace resides in Detroit, Michigan. Horace, welcome to the webinar. I'm so thrilled that you could be here today. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Sherry. I graciously appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And then our second panelist is Dr. Alicia Collins. Alicia is an internationally certified school psychologist and certified school administrator that enjoys supporting students, teachers, and their families. She works at a council in England. A council would be like a school district in the States. She obtained her doctorate degree in educational leadership and her educational specialist degree in school psychology. And her doctoral dissertation included studying hope during COVID-19. So she's going to share some of her expertise on the panel today. She also is an adjunct instructor of university psychology classes and consults with organizations on mental health, mentoring, educational research, and well-being. She is a former consultant with Mentor Nebraska, and she currently lives and resides in London, England. So thank you for joining us tonight from London, England. Alicia, we're glad that you're here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. So before we hear from our panelists, we want to hear from you. So Jake, the next slide, please. So in the chat box, we would love for you to give us, what is your definition of hope? We throw that word around a lot. Oh, I hope this for my students. I hope this for my mentee. I hope this for my family, for my partners, whatever important people you have in your life. But what is it really? So without Googling it, we'd like you to just be brave and go into the chat and say, what do you think it is? And if you'd prefer to answer either how do you define hope or what does hope mean to you, whichever you prefer. So I'll keep an eye on the chat. So we have positive outlook for the future. Thank you. Belief that things can improve. And wow, they're coming in quick. Thank you. Positivity, expectations, belief in good. Thank you for that. That things will get better. That's awesome. Optimism for the future. Defining hope as something positive to work towards. Positive dreams for the future. Being optimistic. A resilient optimism for the future. Faith. Oh, glass. I think that means half full. Belief that things can get better and come true, belief on things going well for the future, a feeling of an expectation, the belief that good things are coming, positive change. So those are some beautiful answers that we have so far. So thank you for being brave and putting those answers in the chat box. And now we would like to share the definition with you, or one of the definitions. So Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one, just like Sherry said, this is one of many definitions, and some of you had some bits and pieces of it, which is great to see. So this is by Dr. Shane Lopez. He is a guru, a hope guru. He has a wonderful book that he wrote called Making Hope Happen. But it's the belief that the future will be better than the present, and that you have the power to make it so. So something within our immediate and individual control. I'm thinking about an example of hope in my life, thinking that you can think now or in the future, and I would really like to be able to live and work between America and the UK in the future. So we'll see what that has in store for me, but that's one of my hopeful goals in my life.
Awesome. And Horace, what do you have for a hopeful goal?
Hopeful goal in my life is to make sure to get as many youth as I can in the city of Detroit to make positive decisions and choices, make positive career goals, and steer as many young educators as I can in the right direction as I'm coming out of education.
That's beautiful, Horace. Thank you. And that's one reason right there why I said I love the work that Horace and his team they are doing in Detroit. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move now into the components of hope. So we have three components, and Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you for these three slides to talk us through what are the three components of hope.
Absolutely. So yes, so those three components, the first one is goals. So hope is built from the goals that matter most to use and that we come back to again and again. So it's not something that we just set and leave for a long time. It's something that we can come back to and fills our minds with pictures of what we want our future to look like. Some goals, if you're thinking like, oh, some goals are vague or fleeting and quickly forgotten, but others are really active and we shape and modify those over time. That's a huge piece of hope. And hope is built from the goals that really matter most to us. And again, that we can see ourselves in the future. So that's a small bit about goals. So as I'm speaking, and Horace and Sherry, we just want you to think about this in your life. So as I'm speaking, think about goals that you have and hopeful goals that you have in your future. The second component is agency. And this is just the perceived ability to shape our lives day to day. And it's our responsibility. So again, it's what's within our control. And it's that motivation piece, or something that we call willpower, or Shane Lopez does, that helps us move towards our goals. And it's really that motivation behind that to help build the capacity for long-term effort. So I kind of think of this as like agents, and we ourselves, we can make things happen, or really we can stop them from happening. And we take responsibility to move our goals and to move towards those over time. And we then, as we continue to do this, we motivate ourselves. And agency really makes us, I really like this, about kind of being like the authors of our lives. And so we, again, have the power to do that ourselves. And then the last part about hope, and I think this one sometimes is the easiest one to like hang your hat on, and think about this really in all of your lives. But pathways, so those are kind of our plans that help us, and we have those motivations, and then it helps us move towards our goals. But we're aware that sometimes obstacles and challenges, that's part of life, come up. And so we remain curious and open to finding better paths or better routes for our situation, and we monitor them. So we know that, again, there are those obstacles, and how can we work towards finding maybe multiple pathways to continue into our desired future.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alicia, for that. And I agree with that piece on multiple pathways. And I think at least students that I've worked with in the past, that's one thing that we get hung up on, is oftentimes they'll have one idea for how to get there. And then when that idea doesn't come to fruition, they get stalled. So that piece of multiple pathways, I see that as very, very critical. So thank you for that overview. So what we want to do now is practice a little bit. So for many, many reasons. One, we want you to be active in this webinar and participate. But we also feel like if we have you do this as adults, then you'll be more prepared to work through these exercises when you're doing it with mentees and youth. So we would love for you to start thinking, or continue thinking, about what is a goal that you have. What is your agency, or how will you be an agent? What is your motivation and your willpower? And what are multiple pathways to get there? So we would love to have you share some of those ideas in the chat. So we'll give you a moment to do that. Generational wealth, leveling the playing field for my children, 401k, life insurance, stock investments. Love that. Empowering youth in the community. That's a great goal. And Philip, do you know how you're going to get there? Do you have your multiple pathways? Erica, traveling, hitting the 50 states by 50. Oh, I love that goal. Seeing the United States, saving money, and saving PTO. Yes, those all go hand in hand, don't they? Managing my ADHD in a way that makes my relationship to work less stressful. I am seeking therapy and psychiatry to find partners who can help me improve my tools. And I'm working through a workbook on my own. Beautiful. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, Madison. We really appreciate you. Life insurance, stock investments, and real estate. Great. Thank you for adding to that, Philip. Getting out and walking and exercising every day. Yes. My webinar yesterday, or not webinar, my workshop yesterday was on joy and happiness. And one of those pieces is called nature bathing, but it's getting outside and breathing air and experiencing things that nature gives us. Research shows it only takes 5 minutes outside to get some benefits from that. There's a lot of great things in the chat. Focusing on physical health, eating better, creating a workout routine, so important. When we take better care of ourselves, I believe we can do better for others as well. Healthy choices every day, improving residents. Whoops, that one popped away. Oh, I'm sorry. Improving residents in rural communities. That is a huge goal. And apologies to people, I'm not reading all of these, but thank you to everyone for putting them in the chat. So please feel free to go ahead and read through some of those. Okay, let's get ready to turn it over to Horace. Horace, we are ready to start hearing some of your, oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Before we do that, let's talk about this one. So Alicia, I'm going to turn it to you really quickly to talk about hope as a trend. Excuse me, I got ahead of myself.
That's okay. So every year, the American Psychological Association has trends, and hope is one of the trends for 2024. So what they do is they speak to about 100, more than 100 leading psychologists to help identify the trend. So it is a really hot topic right now, and it should be. There's lots of positives coming from trend. Greater life satisfaction, better happiness, and we'll talk more about some individual factors and successes within individuals and within the workplace. But we can cultivate hope through our mentorship programs, and it's really asking about future dreams and how to get there, which is a pivotal part about mentorship. So as we're kind of talking today, I want you to think about some of these questions. Who do you want to be if you're a mentor? Who do you want your mentee to be? Who do you want on your team surrounding you in your work life, in your personal life? Do you want someone who's really hopeful, or do you want someone who is a glass half empty, full of despair? Those kinds of people. So think about that as well, because sometimes I think hope can be foreign concept to some. I know some of our levels are different on what we know, but think about some of those questions, and if you'd rather have a hopeful person or someone who is not hopeful for the future. I know what team I'd rather want to be on.
Absolutely. And I do too. That's why I have both of you as panelists today. I think it's really interesting, though, that is a trend word. So thank you, Alicia, for that. So now I think I'm ready to turn it over to Horace. That was the double segue, Horace. So you get twice the game time there. But Horace, I put this picture in because I wanted people to see the amazing folks on your team who are all just as equally as wonderful as you are. But I would love for you to talk a little bit to us about how hope is part of all the work you do. You do a lot of work in empowerment. You do a lot of work with safety, with Black men and Black boys and Black scholars. So go ahead and talk to us a little bit about what you see in the schools and in the mentoring situations you're in. And then if you want to broaden it to your community of Detroit, that would be beautiful too. Thank you, Horace.
I appreciate that. Just take a couple minutes. Just to let you know that hope is at the foundation, the apex of what we're doing, especially with our affinity groups and also ERGs. ERGs are employee resource groups. And what the work that we're doing is we're bringing students together, bringing people together as far as education is concerned, where we're able to support and help understanding and also create safe spaces for Black boys as well as our Black men in education. To speak a little bit about it, I'm gonna do a flare and then I'm gonna do a focus to make sure that you really can understand what's going on. When we talk about hope, dispelling myths, and what we see in public education is the perception is that our Black boys and Black youth are underachievers, they're lazy, lacking intelligence. They contribute to negative stereotypes. And we're dispelling that. And we're bringing hope to these young men by telling them that they can achieve, that they can go to higher levels. But also hope is key in another way. When we talk about hope, dispelling suicide rates that we see not only in Detroit, but in America, amongst Black adolescents, and boys between 2007 and to all the way to 2020, we've seen 144% increase.
Mm.
And to bring it to a focus, because I really want you to understand what I'm saying. I had a young man in my classroom this year who told me he got suspended for a day. He did something that was knucklehead like kids do, but he was out an additional 4 days. And so by that time, I said, wait a minute, now this is a problem. I'm gonna have to call the parents and see what's going on. He came to school on the 6th day and he said, Mr. Stone, before you get on me, let the kids go to gym and I'm gonna tell you what's going on. Kids went to gym, he told me. He said, listen, I got suspended for the day. I was getting ready to come back to school, but guess what? I attempted to kill myself with taking half a bottle of Advil. So these are not statistics that we just talking about. This is stuff that's really, really going on. And so hope is key and mentorship is key because we're trying to cultivate our scholars. Sherry.
Yeah, that's a mic drop, right, Horace? Hope is key, mentoring is key. All of these pieces that we do make a huge difference.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So we do want to invite you to Horace's webinar. Jake put the link in the chat. So if you'd love to join us, I will be there as well. So I want to support my guys. So Friday, October 25th, 5 to 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. And am I right on the time zone with that?
You're
Horace,
absolutely
Eastern
right.
Standard Time. Okay, perfect. So anything else you want to say about the webinar, Horace, before we move on?
Yes, I do want to say with the webinar, it will be informative. It'll be also an eye-opening experience as far as what is being done locally and also in the government level to assist with affinity groups. Also bringing change in the education spectrum. And Sherry, I didn't have a chance to say one more thing before I hand it back over to you. So mentor groups in across the country are very important because it guides children and youth to a better understanding. But as you can see with the statistics that I just gave you in Detroit, mentor groups save lives. Sherry.
There's the mic drop moment. Mentoring saves lives. Absolutely. Thank you, Horace. That was great. All right, Alicia, we're going to go ahead and move back to you. So let's reflect for a little bit. So Alicia, part of your doctoral dissertation was quoted in a book. So I want to read a little bit from that, and then I'd like to ask you to reflect on that. And then Horace will also ask for your input on that and your experience with schools. So hope is a powerful tool that provides several pathways to future success. According to Dr. Alicia Collins, hope in the time of crisis, fostering hope is vital. When students realize that the future will be better than the present, that is hope in action. And Alicia writes, hope can continue to help alleviate difficulties that arise in the future. To invest in hopeful educational staff, we invest in the future of our youth. When everyone is inclusive, from educators to parents to students, it will make our world a more hopeful place. So Alicia, go ahead and get us started on some thoughts you have around the work that you did and that was quoted in that book.
Yeah, so I think there's maybe two pieces to this. First was my doctoral work, and that was right after COVID, which was a very interesting time. And it was specifically around educators. And this proved that they were more hopeful when they were back in schools, could see children, they had more pathways. So for a lot of people during COVID, our kind of pathways were shut, didn't have multiple routes for that hopeful future. So it was things that I think we thought, but that actually proved it. And then the 12th grade ready book also kind of goes back to what Horace was saying as well about we are saving our youth. But we need hopeful adults in order to have hopeful children. And that can be in any capacity. It could be a parent, it can be a mentor, it can be a teacher, educator, it can be a grandparent, a neighbor. It can come in so many different avenues, but it's also important that we're showing kids that you don't have to go down one path. I think, and that was a huge piece of the 12th grade Ready book, is that we have to prepare them that a lot of different things are going to come in their lives, and how can they maneuver around those obstacles? How can they create a successful and supportive kind of community around them? And there's not one way. You don't have to go to college in a specific 4-year degree. You can have multiple different pathways. When I was a school psychologist in the States, that was a huge part of my job, along with teammates and some mentoring components as well. But a lot of kids would come to me for advice on, well, what do I do next? And problem solving and thinking about what their future could be. You can never ask too little. Even now, I ask 4- and 5-year-olds, what do you want to be when you grow up? I still don't know sometimes what I want to be when I grow up, but it's okay. It's okay to have goals really far away in the future, but it's also good to have ones right here and now. And it's just important we start small, and hope, again, can come from anyone. And something just so small, hope trickles, it travels, it's a ripple effect. So starting small and starting now is really key for these kids, because as Horace said, we can save them. And it is saving kids. So
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up either. And I'm 60 and I'm still reinventing myself every day. So it's just one of those evolutions. But Horace, what spoke to me is when the line that said, to invest in hopeful educational staff, we invest in the future of our youth. And I feel like that is what you do day in and day out. So Horace, what are you thinking about that passage from the 12th grade Ready book?
So I love the passage one, but it speaks to me. I'm gonna just frame it all up and being intentional. When we have intentional educators in front of our scholars, then intentionally they will be successful. When we have intentional educators who are hopeful for our scholars, then that means that our scholars will now have success. A lot of times what happens is people will get into education, but they'll get into it for the wrong reasons, which is a job or just to make a buck. And so what happens is it's reflected in what the scholars do and how they move and react. So again, I love the passage, but the passage speaks to being intentional and being more focused and targeted.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Horace.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few more slides before we take the hope inventory. So we're getting closer. We're leading up to the moment where you can do your own hope inventory and get your hope score. So Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few facts. And then Horace, I'm going to ask for you to reflect on those facts with what you're seeing in Detroit. So Alicia, go ahead and get us started, please.
yeah, absolutely. So these are just a few facts. There's a lot out there, but thinking about individually, these are things that if you're hopeful, there's higher levels of well-being, lower mental health concerns, for students, increased grade point average, increased likelihood to graduate college, and hopeful people tend to live longer, report greater levels of life satisfaction, and overall levels of happiness. And something that is really interesting, an interesting fact, is that law students, their level of hope actually predicted their standing in school more precisely than LSAT admissions tests. So we could go into a whole nother webinar on testing, but this shows just really the impact of hope. And that even goes beyond just graduation into law school. So some really kind of key individual components of why hope is important.
Horace, reflecting on those ideas.
Reflecting on those ideas, I was just reading the article the other day talking about Detroit, and talking about high school graduation rates.
Mm.
And what we noticed was that high school graduation rates amongst Black children was up to 71%. And so it's up to 71% because we have now people in Detroit that are being more intentional in the work. We've seen increased GPAs. Mental health concerns, and we'll talk about this a little bit further. Uh, we have MTSS programs, multi-tiered systems and supports that we'll talk about a little bit later. But those services are being provided in schools. So guess what? It's keeping the youth in the building. And so with that, we see a lot of things that are taking place that are positive. Sherry?
Absolutely. That's great. And so true. The structure of school is so necessary for these students, especially when they have hopeful adults there that can help them. So the next piece is some organizational facts. So Alicia, if you want to talk us through those next 3 or 4 organizational facts, go
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, Horace, you are singing. MTSS is so key and pivotal, and mentoring is really at that bottom level, right? It should be available and open to all students. And hopefully, again, this shows everyone hope and the power of mentorship. With organizations, and we'll talk a little bit too, as we're talking about leaders and hopeful leaders, but it also trickles over to the workplace. So if you're a hopeful employee, there's less absenteeism, you are more productive, you're more likely to stay in the job, and there's higher levels again of that job satisfaction, creativity, flexibility, and overall levels of inventiveness. So being an hopeful adult also trickles to the workplace, which is so important because we work many, many hours of our lives. And so it's important to be hopeful in your job as well.
Mhm. Horace, thoughts from you?
Oh, so really the thoughts for me, and Alicia, you spot on. Um, when you have the attitude of gratitude as a institutional leader, what happens is you begin to bring people to a place where they want to come to. We spend 8 hours a day working and working with the youth and trying to cultivate lives, but more importantly, we're rubbing elbows with each other. And so having that restorative mindset, and then that's really what you hit on, having that restorative mindset allows people in the job place to want to be in the job place and have satisfaction. We don't get paid enough to be educators, right? But when we have it to want to do, then we will stay where we need to be, and which is at the workplace. Sure.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's hear from everyone on the call at this point. We want to ask you to jump into the chat and answer, how does hope show up in the work that you do? So we've given several examples. We've heard Alicia talk about some examples from when she was in the States. And Horace, we've heard lots of examples from you in Detroit, but we want to hear from you now. How does hope show up in the work that you do? And I'll do my best to read some of the chat, but it does come through pretty fast. All right, in seeing results, thank you. Believing in the capabilities of families to make change, yes, to reach their goals, so important. We're measuring hope of staff, mentors, and youth. That's awesome. Intentionally using those results, being present, being available. That's so wonderful. Enjoying work, yes, and feeling empowered to make change. That is the idea of positive genius, which is the basis of happiness as well. Seeing a child solve his or her problem by themselves. That's so great. Critical for the youth that I mentor to make positive changes and see the trajectory of their lives. Absolutely. I see it work when a child has hope. Thank you for that, Jim. When the youth see that there are people out there that they believe in, and they care about them no matter what they're going through. Yes. We have to be there for folks in the good times and the bad. Hope shows up when we give our children something to look forward to. That's great. Where there's life, there is hope. That's beautiful as well. The connections created and community engagement, also being recognized by other professionals. Yes. Giving space for young people to make choices. That's so important. Being present for our youth. So all those are really great things. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those examples of how hope shows up in the work that you do. So are you ready to do a hope inventory to see what your hope score is? If you want to do some reactions, some thumbs up, some hearts, so we know you're still out there in the world, we would love to see that from you too. Wonderful. Thank you so, so much. So let's get ready to move on to our hope inventory of 8 questions. Just a few reminders on this. Remember that there's no right or wrong answers, but the best results are going to be when you're authentic and how you are feeling most of the time. Remember too, this is not a score that we're going to share on this webinar. It is strictly for you, so you can answer it as honestly as you feel. One thing that we do want to point out is after you enter your scores, you do have to enter your email and you do not get any sort of spam. I have done the inventory. I've gotten no weird emails. Alicia, I know you've done it multiple times. You've never gotten any weird emails, and it's affiliated with a book. So please know that we're not asking you to do anything that we haven't done ourselves. So Alicia, with that little bit of background, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about the Hope Score inventory.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. I don't know if I have necessarily anything too much to add, but there's 8 questions and answer truthfully, and how you can answer is on the screen, and it'll also walk you through that within the individual questionnaire. And this is one of many. Again, this is by the authors below. It's a fantastic book. If you liked Making Hope Happen, it's called Hope Rising. It's really, really fantastic. So it's also research and evidence-based, but it's just one of many kind of inventories. But this one I really like as a researcher and educator.
So Jake, if you want to go ahead and pop that link in the chat box so people can grab it real easily. Oops, I guess Jake, you already did. You're ahead of me. So thank you for doing that, Jake. You can grab that in the chat. Jake put it in again. Thank you, Jake, for being so consistent. So go ahead and click on that link. Again, you will get 8 questions. It did not take me very long to do it. For me, it was like a gut reaction. When I read the question, I pretty much knew exactly on that Likert scale from 1 to 8 how I would answer the question. So it will be a little bit of awkward silence here where folks are going ahead and working through that assessment. So we will give you a few minutes to do that. Anyone have questions or concerns before we get started?
I got the smooth jazz music queued up, so we'll give folks a little bit of time to do it with some nice reflective music in the background.
That is perfect. Jake, you got this. Thank you.
Can you hear that?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you. Okay, Jake, thank you for that beautiful music. That was a good counter to what people were experiencing on the other side of the house. When I went through that hope inventory, I honestly zipped through it in a couple minutes. So we do apologize. I do think we had too many folks trying to do it at the same time. What I might recommend is if you would be willing to copy paste that link off of the webinar. And then you can go into it when we're off the webinar at your own time, at your convenience today. That would be perfectly great. And we can still continue on. We can still give you ideas of what your score might look like based on the results. So no worries. It's totally fine. We're adaptable. We can make it work. I do hope that you can find a couple minutes later today, though, to go back in and find your hope score, because it is really interesting to find that for yourselves. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide. Alicia, I'll go ahead and have you just talk a little bit about the scores, even though folks will not have those in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just sitting here laughing. Dr. Hellman's going to be like, what happened on the 17th of October? Why are all of these entries coming in? Because then they use that data as well for kind of their own use. But yeah, I fear we have maybe broken the website, but hopefully Dr. Hellman will be super excited to see all of these new hope scores coming through. This is just an example. I took it again this morning. I take it often because our hope score can change depending on season, what's going on in our lives. So I take it often. It's not something that's consistently stable over time. But your hope score can look, Jay, do you mind just going back one? Your hope score can look at, oops, sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. There you go. Perfect. Sorry. It breaks it down to those three areas that we were kind of talking about already. So you get an agency score. So again, that's that willpower, that's that motivation. You also get a pathway score. So thinking about the plans, and they talk about that as called way power. And then you get a total score. And then on the left-hand side is what eventually you can compare it to. So maybe you're low hope right now. Maybe you are hopeful. So it's also a really great just reflective tool. And then you don't have to have the book, and it will give you specific things that you can work on, which is really great, having really quick kind of pieces that you can work on to either improve your hope, something else to maybe think about, or just again reflect on what you've been doing really well. So that's just a brief snapshot of what your inventory can look like.
Beautiful. Thank you everyone again for being so flexible. We certainly appreciate that. So on the next slide, we were going to ask you to reflect about your hope score. So instead of doing that, Alicia, would you feel comfortable just talking about your experience with your hope score, and then talking about any strategies that you implement that, just because folks don't have their scores in front of them at the moment?
Yeah, so I think we'll talk a little bit more about some strategies moving forward, but something that I just consider is I just use it again as a reflective tool to think about different ways to move forward. So I really like to write things out. So I may consider, oh, my hope is a little bit low right now. What can I do? Do I need more motivation? Do I need more supportive people around me? Do I need to call, my family or my friends or someone else that just gets it and can kind of give me that agency and motivation as well? Or do I need to change paths? So is this what I'm thinking about? Is it too far ahead? Do I need to make it more manageable, chunk it down, make my goal into smaller pieces? Because maybe it's too far in or going somewhere in the future and I need it to be more here and in the now. Something I like as well is someone who can help keep progress on you. So someone who can check in and see how you're doing on specific things as well. So those are just a few little things I do after I take this assessment, or just in general, just thinking about hope. And I kind of know when I'm hopeful and when I'm not, and then what to do differently.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm seeing in the chat, Carol had taken it before, so she's just going to go with her score from the past. And then Evelyn, I love your remark, hoping, yes, that the page could get maybe a little bit more capacity because it would be cool for you to do with your students in your class. And just as a problem solving strategy, maybe you could have a few kids go in at the beginning of class, a few kids try it at the middle of class, and a few kids at the end of class, and then you wouldn't have all of them in the system at once. But I appreciate you wanting to do that with your students. That's awesome. And then it looks like Philip got through. So that's awesome. So thank you, Philip, for sharing your scores with us. So let's go ahead and move now into some of the research on what are some strategies that we can truly use for fostering hope.
Is this me? Yes.
Yes, Alicia, go ahead and take us through those.
Perfect. So with some individual strategies, and I alluded to some of these, it's okay to start small. So again, starting somewhere is better than starting nowhere. Within the research, there's something called future casting. And so that is where we really think about our goals. So think about your goals and how they're stated. So we should state them positively. They should be very specific and concrete. So you should be able to kind of monitor again your progress. Are you making progress or not? Are there obstacles, other things you need to think about? Connect the present and the future by having maybe a conversation with someone living the life that we want. So again, that networking piece, this could be great for our youth, to try and get them connected with someone that, again, that they want to be a cook. So let's get them into culinary, or let's have them interview someone. We can do that with our students. And then just creating the momentum and energy of hope. So that's a bit of future casting, is just that internal creating that energy. And again, when we make those goals smaller and we start seeing progress and making progress, then hope continues. So when we see the small wins and you celebrate the small wins, that's really important. There's something called putting agency on autopilot. So once you begin becoming a hopeful person, and I'm seeing it in the chat that there's a lot of high hope people out there, hope just becomes something second nature. You don't have to think about it. So there's cues and there's defaults, and you're then the hopeful contagion. So you're that hopeful person that someone may come to. So we also want to get to that point where when you are starting to see your scores, and if you are on those higher hopeful individuals, you may do things that are hopeful that you don't even realize you're doing. And I also think it's important that we reflect on the past. So think about what worked, what didn't work. Again, I do that a lot. When was I really hopeful and why was that? Oh, this was happening. And so then you can identify those themes to implement again now, so you can use those in the future. And that's great for our students to also show that kids could go through, some really terrible situations, and it's okay to reflect on the past, because there could also be some things within the bad that actually helped them at that time as well, that they didn't even realize. And then planning for the what ifs. Life, we have to plan for different things as well. So having multiple pathways is critical. It's critical as adults. It's critical for our students that they have multiple plans and they have someone to bounce those plans off of. Could be a crazy plan, but let them have it. Okay, maybe that's C, but let's think of maybe a more specific and concrete plan. But I like that plan. It's creative. And then prepare to pivot. Whenever I hear that, I think of Ross and Friends pivoting around the couch, but prepare to pivot. It's really important that we think about life comes at us and we need to change and potentially then reframe our outcome. So maybe our outcome again is too far away. We need to make it closer. Maybe it's something that we're not interested in anymore and we need to change completely, and that's okay. So prepare to pivot.
Beautiful. Thank you for explaining those individual strategies. And Horace, how are you seeing those individual strategies pop up either for the adult men that you're working with or for the youth that you're working with?
So, and I was sitting here as Alicia was reading it, just pausing and paraphrasing in my mind. And so when we talk about reflect on the past, Michael Jordan said it best. He said that in order to win, I had to lose. And so being able to be reflective as to how the movements of these gentlemen are in their academic prowess or whether they're doing on their job, it's causing them to be successful in the future. Why? Because they're under the proper tutelage and mentorship. But also to prepare to pivot is powerful. And it's powerful because expect the unexpected, because the unexpected is expected. So expect that you're going to have stumbling blocks. Expect that you're going to fall short. Expect that things are going to happen. But how when those things happen, you can pause, you can pivot to get to your successful place. And the last thing is, when we talk about mentorship, which ties right into hope, in order to be a mentor, you have to be a mentee. That means that you're a mentee to somebody that's giving you some great advice, great knowledge that's going to help you get to the next level.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. So let's move on to leaders now. So I'm not sure how many of you on the call are leaders. There's a part of me that believes we're all leaders because we can all lead from whatever seat we're in. Some of us, however, may have the title of a leader in our job description. So Alicia, take us through, please, these leader strategies. We have 3 of those.
Yeah, so these are just 3. There's lots out there. But again, thinking about, we want all of you to be hopeful people, but especially hopeful leaders. And so how can you, and you should be creating and sustaining excitement about the future with things that you're saying, goals that you have. How are you knocking down obstacles? So are you talking to others and thinking about and problem solving about what are those obstacles? What are those challenges? And as a leader, how can you knock those down so people can have the pathways to reach those end goals? And then thinking about reestablishing goals and re-goaling. I think that's really important as a leader, to say, yeah, that's okay. This isn't working. And then this is what we're going to do instead, and being really honest about that. Because again, there are certain situations where you have to as a leader. I think maybe a lot of you can think about leaders that didn't do that. And it's really important to be honest and hopeful. And a majority of leaders spend more time, I always call this firefighting or reacting to problems rather than making hope happen. And so we want all of you to think about, as leaders, because I believe too that we are all leaders in some capacity, is how can we continue to make hope happen for those that we're working with.
That's great. And Horace, what kind of things do you see in the work that you are doing as far as the leader strategies? How do those show up for you in Detroit?
So how they show up with me is when we look at the first bullet, so create and sustain excitement about the future. Uh, our thought is identifying your value. When you know your value of who you are, then you don't have to give people discounts. That means that you understand who you are, you establish you're grounded in who you are, and you can be the best person and be confident in what you're doing. Where it says knocking down existing obstacles, that's simply focusing on the finish. Being able to focus, set a goal, understand where you're going, and get there, and taking care of the bottom line. And last but not least, reestablish goals and re-goal simply is approaching the thought process by saying I'm gonna have A, B, C, D, and E plan in place, because you just never know what might happen. And so when you have those plans in place, it's impossible for you to fail because you've already had the expectation. Sure.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So Jake, if you want to switch to the next slide, I have a little bit of information that I found from Gallup. So I would like to share some of this information with you. So one of the studies I read from Gallup said that when people have a leader who makes them feel hopeful and enthusiastic about the future, 69% are engaged in their jobs. That's a huge number. Any of you who follow workplace culture and engagement. So they're more excited about their work, they're more innovative, and they're at that creative threshold, longer longevity with the organization. And that's such a key one. Now, many of the organizations I work with not just in mentoring, but across all industries, people are exiting the back door as soon as they can bring people in the front door and get them onboarded. So that's a really important piece. And then, of course, people are more productive and more resilient. So that's important for me. But what really struck me was the last line. Those people without a hopeful leader, only 1%, 1% were committed and energized. So you have to think of that statistic, and you have to have thoughts of being a hopeful leader. I was telling Jake when we were preparing, I kept going back to the article thinking I must have misread that. It can't be just 1%. That's so low, but that's really what the research shows us. And Jake, I'm actually going to call on you at this point, because when we were planning and doing our planning meeting, that statistic really struck with you. So you want to chat with us a little bit about why that statistic was so meaningful to you? Thank you so much, Jake. We appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much for this amazing webinar so far. Yeah, I just when we were doing the run through and I saw that statistic, it really wasn't surprising to me because I have worked with a lot of folks who I don't feel, at least at that point in their journey, were super hopeful. And I remember it having such a huge impact on me, especially when I was working directly with young people, where again, I think there's a question I'm excited for us to get to in the Q&A a little later, but that kind of highlights this. But obviously working with young people directly can feel really urgent and feel really stressful at times. Like, it's like, how do you slow down to start building some of this hope up and start really focusing in on hope? But seeing the leaders that I've worked with later on who have taken that time to be reflective and make the space and make the energy to be hopeful, not just with themselves, but with their teams, the impact has just been so huge in how everybody kind of reacts. Like, I think of when I was working with youth several years ago, there were, to the person in the Q&A's point, there were so many barriers and so many kind of systemic level slash just organizational level issues and things that really needed to change. But since our leadership wasn't very hopeful, it kind of felt like talking to a brick wall. It decreased motivation in everybody. And I think ultimately a lot of us started to get burnt out because our leadership wasn't seeing what could possibly be like a better future. And because they weren't seeing what could be a better future, they weren't open to suggestions and feedback and changes. So I think that experience just was really impactful for me in the way that I now move forward and work with others and interact and do the work that I do of making sure that I'm centering hope, because then it makes other people feel like they can be excited and they can make a change and they can do their best. So yeah, it was just a really interesting statistic. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you for your 2 cents. I really appreciated it and really enjoy that. And just saying, so everybody knows, Jake was a tremendous leader in getting this webinar organized. So thank you, Jake, so much for being a hopeful leader as we were working on this as well. Thank you so much. So I'm going to segue now to Horace, this time for real Horace. I have it in the right order. Horace, we want to talk a little bit more about leadership strategies. And Jake, when you have time, if you want to switch to the next slide, the book All for Them. And this is a book that one of Horace's colleagues wrote. And I love the tagline of the book too. It's a leadership handbook for building staff capacity to properly serve their Black scholars. So if you look at some of the chapter titles, being a champion, communication, underprepared leaders, which is also what we really were just talking about when Jake took the mic, different classroom strategies and restorative circles, none of those chapters say hope in the title, but all of them revolve around hope. Horace, you're also quoted in the book. So I want to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about that book and how can people use that to bring more hope to the Black scholars and Black mentees that they might have.
So real briefly, this book was developed with me being a contributor and Mr. Sean Fisher, who's the actual author. We sat down to really put this book together to bring about change as far as leadership is concerned. A lot of times we have experienced leaders that are kind of off in their leadership and how they go about their focus. And so these main topics that you gave were perfect, you know, being a champion. Being a champion for us just meant supporting the scholars at all costs, taking a deep dive into making sure that they're able to get the best that they can. When we talk about communication, we wanted to make sure in the book that we emphasize that you need to over communicate with your staff as well as your students, your scholars, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Uh, but really, I want to focus on restorative practices.
Mm.
I really want to target that. And the reason why I want to target that is we talked about earlier is giving people a second chance to make a first impression. Well, what does that really mean? That means that as a leader, building leader, or as a district leader, being able to recognize not only your scholars as people, but also recognizing the people that you lead, that we don't persecute the people because they make mistakes, but you give them the supports that they need in order to be successful. And so that is a huge focus for us. We also tied into the book, it's not up here, and I said that I would talk about it just a little while, and that is MTSS, multi-tiered systems and supports. And so for the listening audience that does not know, in schools you have where you have students that might be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. Tier 1 means that it might be just the basic needs or supports that are happening immediately in the classroom. Student might need more time to be able to work things of that nature, or might need one-on-one attention. Tier 2 is a little bit deeper because now we're looking at the student scores. We're looking at some behavior modifications that need to be done. And we're beginning to see if we have to pull other people as the school social worker, the school psychologist, to see what kind of services the child may need. And last but not least, tier 3 is the child that's more severe that might need outside wraparound services. So MTSS is huge. It's a focal point of what we're doing in the school building and also in the school district. But it sets the tone for what happens next for getting our scholars to the next place, the next positive place, which is hope, and sets a foundation for success. Sure.
Sorry, there was a lot of background noise where I am. I'm muted just for a second. Thank you so much, Horace. That was wonderful. So let's go ahead and move on to one of our last sections. And this is just a few bullets on fostering hope, teaching hope to children. And Alicia, if you could take us through those couple of bullets.
Yeah, so I think we've talked a little bit about some of these components already, but just again, just a reminder that as in mentoring programs, we are key adults to be teaching hope to children. And so you can do that by just linking current thinking and learning to their current life now and to their future lives. So even just these discussions, they can be very informal. They don't have to be super in depth, just again, starting small. Teaching children specific multiple pathways to meaningful goals. They maybe not have ever had a conversation about goals or being excited for the future as well. So I think it's really important that you could be that for them. And then conduct community audits. So we've talked about that a little bit, but see who's in the community, who could you pair them up with, or if they could see their future in someone else, could you also bring them in and have a chat with them and see what's out in your community? Because again, hope ripples. It's a ripple effect, and it's really important that we see who is those supportive people around us, so we can again change the lives of our youth.
So true. And then how can this show up in mentoring? Exactly, making those connections. We've all done that throughout the webinar, but if anybody has any other thoughts that they want to drop into the chat box, that's awesome. And I noticed Erica did point out that there's a lot of great things on Shane Lopez, some videos on YouTube. There are more resources than you can probably find time to watch. We love Shane Lopez on this webinar. So yes, anything there, you will not go wrong. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's go ahead and start to wrap up a little bit on our slides. We want to make sure we allow plenty of time for questions from all the attendees. So what we really want you to think about, and I know we've used this word already today, is that ripple effect of hope. How can you be hope dealers, and how can you make hope contagious? So continue to model hope. All of our youth are watching us. They're watching our actions always. So make sure that you are a good model. Provide hope through the support that you are offering. And Horace, I know offline, we had talked a lot about some of your students who college is not the right pathway for them, and how getting certified in trades is so very important. So I'll have you talk about that just for a quick second before we finish up. And then surrounding yourself with hopeful people. That was one of those questions Alicia asked us to think about. Do you want to surround yourself with hopeful people or with people that are more full of despair? And I know the type of people I want to surround myself with. But Horace, if I could go back to you just for a moment to talk about that. It was a really great conversation we had. I was in the Atlanta airport when you called me that day, but we had a really good conversation. So if you could talk just a bit about that. I think that's really important too, because we don't want to assume that our students are going to college, of course.
Well, and real briefly, I'll say thank you, Sheriff, that for a long time we got away in education and made it a one size fit all.
Mhm.
Okay, so everybody goes to school, everybody sits down, the desks are in rows, and everybody pull out your books and your notebooks, and here we go with academics. But how about those kids that say, you know what? I don't want to do this. I want to get my hands dirty and I want to work in a car engine. Or I
Yeah.
want to do hair, I want to do nails, or I want to cook. And so now education is starting to transition back to what we got away from, and that is not always college readiness, but life readiness.
Mhm.
So we're getting back into CTE and things of that nature to support our students.
Mhm. And I think that is that piece, that middle bullet of providing hope through support. What
Yes.
kind of support are you offering them? It isn't a one size fits all. It takes time to get to know the youth, but that's a return on investment. The more time we spend getting to know our youth, then we can provide the solutions and some of those pathways that might work well for them. So thank you for adding that, Horace. I appreciate it. So Jake, if we could go to that last slide with the resources, just to make sure that folks know about the books that we have been mentioning. So Hope Rising, that was the book that we referenced with the inventory. You do not have to have the book to complete the inventory, but there's a lot of wonderful information there. Shane Lopez, love the work that he did. He also was affiliated with Gallup. So I also appreciate the work that he did with Gallup as well. And then there's the cover again for Sean Fisher's book, All for Them, that Horace was also instrumental in the planning of that. So those are our resources, many more things. We love Hope, we've studied it, but these were three that we thought would be simple and easy for you to digest if you wanted to dive in a little more deeply. So Jake, I'm going to turn it over to you to finish up the last few slides and to help us with some questions from the audience.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much for this really amazing presentation. So like I was mentioning, there's a question in the Q&A that I've pondered a lot. I've talked about it in therapy. I think this is a great question. It's a very big question. But so this person is asking, it can feel difficult to maintain hope when, as a staff member at a mentoring program, I can see the way that most / all social services have massive systemic problems that mean the families I work with are consistently underserved by the state. How do you maintain hope in the face of consistent systemic failure? And I'll let whoever feels like they have an answer right away to go first with that one.
I think that is a beautiful question. So Horace, take it away.
So I just wanted to say that as a CASA, court-appointed special advocate for kids in Wayne County, you do see those systemic problems. But just like Jake said, you gotta maintain the hope within you. when you have that foundational hope within you and you're rooted, you can't change the system. But when you change your mindset and you focus in and have a laser focus as to what you want to do with that family or those groups of families, your small change will be a huge change as long as you narrow your focus.
I think that's really important. And another kind of piece of that as well is thinking about who are those people around you, because it's really hard when you feel like you can't move the needle for those big systemic changes. But think about who you're talking to about these things. Are they the people that are pulling you down, where you're just talking more about the problem, or are they the people that are going to build you up and you're going to talk about a solution within your control? So again, it's okay again to start small. I'm even thinking about a time several times when systemically it seemed so bad. And then I had to look within as well to go, who am I sitting at staff meetings? I'm sitting with the other people that are telling me kind of what I want to hear, but that also wasn't healthy for me. And then I wasn't hopeful because then I just saw the problem and I didn't see any solutions. So change who maybe you're speaking with. Power comes with multiple voices as well. So yes, while it's within our control, it's also important that we're thinking about those people within our circle who are also hopeful, so we can talk about things that we can change, because you're right, there's systemic issues that we can't change for us. But again, thinking within and thinking kind of in that immediate circle is really, really important for those harder, bigger topics as well.
Mhm. I'm far from any sort of expert on hope, but just a couple things that came to mind for me. Our son works in healthcare. So as some of you know, there's some horribly failed systemic issues in healthcare. But for him, he's a critical care flight nurse. So he is laser focused on the patient at hand, giving the very best care that he can to that person in the moment. And he knows that there are systemic things that are not great, but he tries to keep it within like his sphere of influence. And that tends to help his mind and mindset to stay hopeful. Also, I think it is important, just that piece of growth mindset of how can we continually have growth mindset. A lot of the work that I do does revolve around systems, and it can get frustrating because I see systems every day that are broken. Um, and yes, we may not be able to change the huge systems, but I feel like I'm making change, kind of that concept of what's called Kaizen. If we make small steps every day, we can have huge impact over time. So those are just a few things that come to mind for me, but also acknowledging, yes, that is a great question. And I think if there was a super easy answer, we would have solved all of that. I don't have the answer for it, but I love the ideas that our panelists brought forward as well. So thank you for the question.
Yeah. The last thing I'll add, just because I have thought about this question so much and spent a lot of money in therapy on talking about this question, a lot of my time, is that I feel like there's the other piece of just keep talking about that question, keep asking others that question, keep bringing it up in meetings, because if we don't talk about that question, then it can the systemic issues and how we're not even just the systemic issues, but how we feel about the systemic issues that we then carry with us as an emotional burden lives in the shadows. So yeah, keep bringing visibility to those, that kind of complexity of maintaining hope uh, and being realistic about what our world and our country is like. The next question is, this person is wondering if you all know of any data on how neurodivergence influences a person's relationship to hope or ability to hope, or if you know any maybe resources or folks that they can explore after this webinar.
Yes, as I was watching some of the questions come in, get the Hope Rising book. There is a specific chapter on hope in the brain. I think it talks more structurally. I've read this several times, but I can't quote it back to you. But there's also research, I think now more recently, that's coming out about neurodivergence. But I think this is more talking about kind of just the factors, but hope is for all. So I think it's also thinking about that. I saw another question, and I don't know, Jake, if you saw that one, but I'll just touch on it now. But same with hope and faith. That is not my area of expertise either, but there's a really great chapter in this book about spirituality and hope. And we could probably have 2 other webinars just on neuroscience and hope. So there's lots out there. I would just encourage people as well to research and read, and there's a lot of really fantastic work out there.
Awesome, thank you. Sherry or Horace, any other resources or thoughts around either of those points, hope and neurodivergence or hope and faith?
So I would say, well, dealing with the neuroscience part, the Pesci Institute in Michigan, they do an outstanding job, and I will be glad to send the website and the communication to you, Jake, so you can send it to the people. They do an outstanding job with neuroscience, and also they correlate it with hope also, and they talk about how using certain parts of the brain and being able to have optimism causes people to be able to extend and have a more hopeful thought process. And then as far as hope and faith is concerned, being an ordained minister, we know faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So you have to begin to speak those things that be not as though they were. When you speak out of your mouth life, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You begin to walk it out. And like you said, Jake, but it starts with the first step, and it starts with a continuous communication. So yes, those are some things that you will want to do dealing with faith and hope. Jake.
Great, thank you all so much for those answers and those further resources as well. Our next question, I feel we've talked a little bit here and there about trauma in general, but this person is wondering how to balance cultivating hope while acknowledging and dealing with specifically your mentee's trauma. Again, anybody is open to answer that one.
I think if you're dealing with your mentee's trauma, you have to be in a space of being a support system. What happens oftentimes is when you're dealing with somebody else's trauma, you become saddled with that trauma while you take on those false burdens. So what has to happen is you have to be able to look objectively and not be immersed in the trauma, but to be able to appreciate what they're going through and then take baby steps in being able to bring them to the other side. And the other side is working their way through it. If a person got into a traumatic car accident, never want to drive again, baby steps to get them behind the steering wheel of a car, building their confidence. It's not going to happen overnight. And understanding that in that process, success will happen over time.
And I think too, as well, having that support system is so important, but also realizing kind of what hat you're wearing. So if you are there as a mentor, you should be there as a mentor and not as a therapist. And that's a hard line sometimes, and that's tough. But I think having hopeful conversations, and again, we talked about reflecting on the past. It's okay to reflect, but letting them lead that is really important, because otherwise it can be more harmful than hopeful or helpful. It's tough. I think that could also be a whole kind of another session. But that's also why a lot of professionals go into kind of more professional roles as school psychologists, as clinical psychologists as well. So that also shouldn't be on all of our mentors. That's a lot to hold. So also making sure that you have those kind of supportive people around you, but make sure your mentor leads that. I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I always, when I work with my program, talk about working together as a constellation of support of the mentor has their role, but then also if the mentee has a therapist or a psychologist or whoever, they have their role, and making sure that those roles and what is talked about, what is covered are very distinct and clear for everybody involved. So thank you both. I think that's all of the questions that we have. So I do want to open it up for all three of you to share if there's any final thoughts or anything that you would like to add before I get into some wrap up with additional resources and stuff. But yeah, any last, not last words, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience here? And maybe we'll start with Horace.
Thank you, Jake. Just everybody listen, just keep hope alive. And know that where you start is not where you have to finish. But as long as you have hope in your heart and you know that you'll be guided on your way. Jake.
Awesome. Sherry?
I'm just super filled with gratitude right now for the amazing people that we had on the webinar, the engagement in the chat and the conversations that we shared today. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. And yes, believe in hope. It is a real thing. I used to think it was just kind of a fluffy thing. I didn't really understand until I started to study it, but it's real, it's research based. I am a hope believer all the way. So hopefully those of you that came into the webinar saying you had a little bit of knowledge, hopefully you're encouraged to study as well and learn a little bit more yourselves. But thank you all so, so much for being here.
Awesome. And Alicia, any last parting remarks?
Just that if you've taken one small thing away, then we've done our job. And so hopefully you will have found something that you can start implementing in real time today, tomorrow, or really soon. So thank you all very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for this really amazing conversation. You provided so much context, so much research, evidence-based information, as well as practical steps and tools that folks can take away. So really appreciate you all and your expertise and your willingness to share with us today. A few last things. We have some additional resources for you as always. Please check out our mentor affiliates. I saw some representation, Jolynn from Washington, in the chat. But mentor affiliates are absolutely amazing. Sherry works with Mentor Nebraska as well, and can support with training, resources, public awareness, and advocacy. You can click on that link or go to our website to learn more about your local affiliate. There's the Mentoring Connector if you're looking to recruit mentors or get involved with a mentoring program. And then we have the National Mentoring Resource Center, which in addition to the resources on Mentor's website, this is full of evidence-based mentoring resources. And also you can apply for no-cost technical assistance and training. Please take the 3 to 4 minute anonymous survey that'll pop up on your screen after this webinar to let us know how we did, what you'd like to see. I know we have a bunch of spin-offs potentially planned for the future after this. And then in a few days to about a week, you'll receive an email with how to download the slides, recording, and resources. It'll also be uploaded to our website. And last but not least, join us actually next week. We have a double feature, kind of in the spirit of Halloween and the spirit of science fiction double features, where we'll be having our rescheduled from July 2nd part of our LGBTQ+ series, Assets of Pride. That'll be on October 24th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So again, thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for all of your participation and your thoughts and ideas. Really grateful for this webinar today. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and take care. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.